Blue Jackets struggled last night defensively and on the penalty kill again, but that doesn't mean that they should trade for Jacob Trouba. We're going to talk about all of that and how to bounce back versus the Vancouver Canucks on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jacket, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. And I also have to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're going to get started with whatever the heck that was last night, which was honestly a pretty poor effort from the Blue Jackets. Another bad road game. Hands up if you're surprised. Another bad game for the penalty kill. Hands up if you're surprised. Another struggling game for Danil Tarasov. Again, hands up if you are surprised. You know, we want to talk about how they need to bounce back versus Vancouver tonight. And Jacob Trouba is on the move. Is he going to be a Blue Jacket? I sure hope not. We'll talk about why that would be a bad move in a little bit here as well. But I want to talk about the game because it wasn't good. That's okay. Maybe that's unfair. There were some things that were good about it, and I want to give a shout out to Cole Sillinger specifically, who I thought was excellent. Who may never score. I thought was like he may never score again. He ended up scoring last night. It's his first goal in like a billion games, I feel like. But he was one of those guys last night that it looked like he was everywhere. I thought he was really very good. At basically all aspects of the game. Ken Johnson was a monster as usual, but like the penalty kill continues to penalty kill or not kill penalties, as the case may be. Like it goes from bad to worse. The Edmonton Oilers were 22nd in the league in the power play going into last night, and then went 2 for 5, so they went 40%. Again, the Blue Jackets continue to not be good enough at the penalty kill. The goaltending was a struggle, which I think we all knew going in. Like, that's what happens when you don't play your goalie for like 3 weeks. And I don't think he helped himself by being, very poor before that. And, they wanted to play Elvis tonight against Vancouver. That's the tougher game, I think they thought going in. So they were like, well, we've got to play Tarasov for one game. Let's put him in against the Oilers. And turns out it was a bad idea. Not that I think Elvis would have done much better, because I think the defense in front of them or in front of him was very, very poor indeed. In all situations, the Oilers created just over 4 expected goals versus the Blue Jackets just under 2 expected goals. Like, and partly that's from power play success, but even if you flip that to 5-on-5, they still created double the amount of expected goals that the Blue Jackets did. So like they're so good offensively. And I think this was a real I don't think that the Blue Jackets would necessarily have lost the game in nationwide against the Oilers if Connor McDavid had played the full game, because it was a 6-1 game. It wasn't like it was the Blue Jackets won that game 2-1 or something. It wasn't a case of, well, if Connor McDavid had been there, he would have simply had 4 points and made it better. But it probably would have been less of a battering. Elvis had the shutout with, I think, 26 seconds left or 29 seconds left. Then they broke it on the power play, which honestly, that might have been the start of the penalty kill downfall. Is that game against the Oilers? But those were really my big 2 issues with the game. I don't want to credit, actually, speaking of players that had good games, Damon Severson both saved a goal and scored a goal, and again was I thought quite good in last night's game. He actually had more ice time than Zach Werenski, which surprises me. And again, so Aaron Portzline said something on Twitter the other day that made me laugh. But he basically said something on the lines of like, you have good Severson nights and bad Severson nights, and you can usually tell which is which within like the first couple of shifts happening. And that's true. Like you can usually tell if he has a bad first shift, then it's not going to be a fun game. If he has a decent first shift, then actually it's probably going to be an okay game. I thought Damon Severson was pretty good last night. The Blue Jackets just, I don't know. It's the road games. I don't know what it is. I don't know why this team can't win on the road. We talked about this in Wednesday's episode, I think it was, where we talked about how they were a 0 goal differential team, but they were plus 14 at home and minus 14 on the road. Well, now they're minus 17 on the road. And they've got 2 more road games to play before they get to go back to Nationwide. And those games are Vancouver, which we'll talk about in a minute here, and Winnipeg, which they battered the Blue Jackets when they were in Nationwide. So, like, I'm not super looking forward to that game, as if they do indeed go into it on a 3-game losing streak, which they just might, depending on what happens next. Like what happens tonight, I guess. But it just feels like everything that was going right for the Blue Jackets when they were on that point streak was going right. And then everything that wasn't going right, they kind of made up for it. But now it feels like everything that's going wrong is going wrong. And everything that should go right is they managed to kind of fumble it somehow. And that's not like puck luck is a thing. But this is not a case of like, the California road swing was frustrating because they were playing well and losing anyway. They're playing badly and losing at the minute, and that is both worrying and frustrating and reminds me all too much of last season's Blue Jackets. So, like, is it just, like, emotional exhaustion? Is it that they've reached the end of, like, this exceeding expectations play that they've been on? Like, I wouldn't necessarily call it, like, a hot start, but they're still playing 500 hockey, and when was the last time the Blue Jackets were playing 500 hockey in the month of December, let's say? But it is starting to worry me because there's just, even in the games where they play well, there's still things that you look at and you're like, man, that they got lucky there, like the game against Chicago, for example, like they got lucky because they managed to they outscored them at 5-on-5. The penalty kill atrocious and has continued to be atrocious since that game. And, beyond that, we on like 11 straight games, allowing at least 1 power play goal. And I believe they're on a 3-game streak for actually allowing multiple power play goals. They allowed 2 against Edmonton last night. They allowed 2 against Calgary. They allowed 3 against Chicago. Like, 7 power play goals in 3 games is not good enough. And I hate to keep harping on and on about it, but like that's the biggest issue for me right now is if the penalty kill is, semi-competent, then that's not a 6-3 game. Like that's a 4-3 game. And that's surmountable. You score to make it 4-3 with, 13 minutes left, I think, when Sillinger scored. You can pull the goalie. You have the chance to tie the game. If it's 6-3, with however much time left in the game, like that's a completely different game. So the penalty kill needs to be fixed. Interestingly, I don't remember who tweeted this, but someone said that they talked to Everson about the penalty kill, and he said that they haven't been able to identify any like structural issues with it. And I kind of get that because it looks like things are going wrong basically every single way. Like they're finding ways to allow power play goals, they're finding ways to not kill penalties. But to me, that suggests that the entire penalty kill is kind of a structural issue. Like if everything is going wrong, then maybe you need to throw the entire penalty kill out and start again. So we'll see. They might just, I don't know whether they just kind of keep clinging to it until they get back to Nationwide and can kind of really put some time in to figure it out. Like it's tough to fix things on the road. I feel like, especially, you're in Calgary on Tuesday? You're in Edmonton Thursday, Vancouver Friday, back to Winnipeg Sunday, and then back home on Tuesday. Like that's a tough week of travel, and it's tough to work on things. I don't know that they'll get much practice time like for this entire week. Like they'll get morning skates and stuff, but will they get time to, do a full practice? Like maybe tomorrow, depending on when they leave Vancouver or when they get into Winnipeg, but like they might not get to practice until, they get back on Monday from Winnipeg, and that's if they do. They might travel back on Monday, So like, there's not a lot of practice time in there. There's not a lot of time that they can figure out. Hey, this is how we fix this. So I don't know. Like, there's not like an easy answer here. It might just be, hey, let's just tear all of the power play up. The penalty kill, excuse me. Let's tear the penalty kill up, and we'll start again and go from there. So we'll see. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk about Vancouver, because that's where the Blue Jackets are tonight, and I'm sure this is going to be a stressful and not at all fun game. But we'll talk about that in just a second here at Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'll tell you about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and other sports all in one place. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can do live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Once again, if you place your first $5 bet and it wins, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets that you can spend on whatever you want. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and also us, the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about the Vancouver Canucks, because they are also kind of going through it a little bit. They actually have a worse record in the last 10 games than the Blue Jackets right now, even though I believe they're above them in the standings. Yeah, so the Canucks are 13-7-4 right now. The Blue Jackets are 11-11-3. Canucks, I think that's good for, I want to say 30 points to the Blue Jackets 25. So like, they're only a couple of wins ahead of the Blue Jackets, but this is not going to be an easy game, I don't think. They're on a 3-game point streak right now, the Canucks. They've gone to overtime 3 straight games, but they beat Buffalo and then Detroit and then lost at home to Minnesota. Not last night, I think the night before, in overtime. And they've got arguably the only American defenseman better than Zach Werenski on the team in Quinn Hughes. So that'll be an interesting and fun matchup. Quinn Hughes has 10 points in his last 5 games. Zach Werenski has 7 points in his last 5 games. I assume that's because the Tampa Bay game is finally out of the Tampa Bay game was 7 games ago, so it's out of the stat bulking. But this could be an interesting game. In terms of the Canucks, I feel like they're having a really weird season. Like, people that aren't supposed to be producing are, and people that are supposed to be producing aren't. Like, I know Elias Pettersson had a really slow start. He's back up to 23 points in 24 games, so like, it seems like he's fine. They don't have JT Miller at the minute. He's in the player assistance program. He had a really great season for them last year. Connor Garland actually third in scoring amongst Canucks with 22 points in 24 games. Jake DeBrusk has been a really fun free agent signing for them. Brock Besser not been playing up to expectations. And then the defense it's literally just Quinn Hughes and friends at the minute, which, like, okay, the Blue Jackets defense is kind of Zach Werenski and friends at the minute, but Zach Werenski has 27 points. Damon Severson is in second on defensive scoring with 14. Quinn Hughes, I believe, has 29 points, which is fully 20 points more than Philip Hronek, who is sitting in second place, and he's also injured at the minute. So, like, the second highest scoring defenseman right now is Eric Brandstrom, who has 7 points in 21 games. So, like, it'll be an interesting matchup. Both teams are scoring a lot of goals and allowing a lot of goals, so we'll see where it goes from there. The Blue Jackets are 8th in the league in goals for per game and 30th in goals against per game. The Canucks are 11th in goals for per game and 24th in goals against per game. So, like, buckle up, basically. This might be an interesting one. Especially, again, it goes back to 5-on-5 because it always does. The Blue Jackets are still succeeding at 5-on-5 and not succeeding at all at special teams, whereas the Canucks are 11th in the league on the power play and 10th on the league in the penalty kill. So I wouldn't expect the Blue Jackets power play or penalty kill woes to be solved tonight. I don't see that happening. It feels like it's going to be a game of, if the Blue Jackets take a penalty, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the power play goal will be scored, which is kind of where I'm at right now. Like, the game last night against Edmonton, obviously they scored on, I think, was it the first power play of the game that they scored on? And then they had that, they killed the first one, and then they had a second one, and then they just allowed a goal on that one. And then they had that full 4-minute double minor against Dante Fabro. And I spent the entire time, like, just really, really tense and waiting for them to score a goal, because that would have been the killer, you know? It wasn't. It turns out the killer had already been done, but, like, I hate not having faith in the Blue Jackets special teams on either side, because I feel like for the most part they've had one of the power play or the penalty kill has been like mid to acceptable. Usually the penalty kill has been mid to acceptable. The power play's been a disaster for almost a decade now. But right now they're both bad. So like the Blue Jackets are doing really well at the 5-on-5, but the 5 special teams continues to be the opposite of special. Whereas I think Vancouver is probably going to feast on special teams, which is going to be tough to watch. I am not super enthusiastic about this game, partially because it starts at 3 a.m. for me, and also partially because, like, I don't know that the Blue Jackets ever really do super great in Vancouver. Like, I don't know off the top of my head what the last year's season series was like. But I feel like Vancouver is just always painful. The good news is we'll probably see Elvis Merzlikins tonight. He's had a couple of decent games. After, again, a spread. He had a couple of bad games, then a couple of decent games, then a couple of bad games, then a couple of decent games. Hopefully he has a decent game tonight. Keeps popping up that save percentage. On the other side, I assume that we'll see Kevin Lankinen, who's got a 906 and is 12-3-3, and I believe has set a Vancouver record for potentially an NHL record for the first goalie to go. I think he's gone like 10-0-0 in his first 10 road games with the team. I don't know if that's a Canucks record or an NHL franchise or an NHL record, but like it's still pretty impressive. It does mean that potentially at home he's not doing all that great, because of his 12 wins, I think 10 of them have come on the road. So it looks like he's 2-3-3 at home, which is not a great record, but a 906 save percentage, 2 shutouts on the season. He's doing just fine, and we'll see how it goes. I feel more comfortable with Merzlikins in net than I do with Tarasov in net, which would have been a weird thing to say this time last season, but Tarasov just isn't getting it done right now, and I think partially that's because of rust, and partially I think that's because maybe he's not the goalie that they thought he was. He's still young, like there's still room to work there, but we'll see what happens when goalie contracts need to be handed out at the end of the year. In terms of predictions, it feels bad to bet against the Blue Jackets. Like, my heart says one thing and my head says another. So, like, I do think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I do think this is probably going to be, like, a 5-4 nightmare game. That's the feeling I have. Or it's going to be, like, a 2-1 game. Nothing in between. I don't think it'll be, let's say a 5-4 Blue Jackets win in overtime. Let's say a Kent Johnson goal is happening. But I'm not, like, super enthusiastic about that prediction. If it turns out the Blue Jackets lose this game by a massive margin, I won't particularly be very surprised, because again, they're on the road, and right now, like, I just kind of assume that if they're on the road, they're going to lose the game, in the same way that if they go on the penalty kill, they're going to allow a goal, which is not like a great feeling to have about this team, but it is how I'm feeling. So I want to talk a little more about the defense specifically, because the defense has not been great, but here's the thing. Adding Jacob Trouba to your defensive core does not make your defense better. So we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about Jacob Trouba. Blue Jackets have been linked to him. I feel like they were linked to him last time as well. He's on his way out of New York. It sounds like he's either going to be traded, and if he won't waive his new trade clause, they will just put him on regular waivers, and then the team that wants him will just pick him up. And a lot of people speculating that is Columbus, because Columbus has, in theory, the room for him, but also they specifically have the cap space, because his $8.5 million cap hit is not going to fit in. I think there are like 6 teams total that have that much cap space right now. I don't think that the Blue Jackets should do this, unless the only reason that this would work for me is if they do something like flip him for Damon Severson, who is making less money but for more time, or they manage to flip him basically immediately. Like, they trade for him, they get assets from New York, and then flip him for more assets, but retaining 50%. Because again, the Blue Jackets have $1 bajillion in cap space. If they trade for him straight up, though, like, that feels, I don't know. I won't understand that move. Like, is the third pair struggling in the minute? Yes, I don't think adding Jacob Trouba to that mix is going to help anyone. It's going to eat into the cap that they want to save for the offseason, basically. So unless, like, I don't know. There are ways that I could see this working, and if they do trade for him, it's not the worst thing in the world. I would expect that they would get... I do expect it would be something like the Jake Wallman trade, where it's the player plus a pick for future considerations. I wonder if they do something like Trouba and a first for, like, a fourth from Columbus, or, you know, one of the picks that they got from the Jiricek trade. So they got, what, a first, a second, a third, and a fourth? I wonder if the third or the fourth goes back the other way to New York for, like, Trouba and a first. The Blue Jackets take all of the salary, because they can afford it, and then see where we go from there. But, like, I'm not... Jacob Trouba won't help this team is the thing. I did a little bit of digging. Like, I looked at some of his stats. He plays a lot of minutes for the Rangers, and usually does not do super great in them. The only thing that he's actually, like, kind of good at, and I'm using Micah Blake McCurdy's hockeyviz.com for this. It's really, really great. And it basically distills a player down into, like, this is what his rating is. And it takes into account, like, 5-on-5 offense, defense, quality of competition, quality of teammates, time on ice, special teams, like, goal scoring, assisting, penalties taken versus penalties drawn, things like that. And basically the only thing that Jacob Trouba is not, like, a net negative in is 5-on-5 offense, which the Blue Jackets don't really need another defenseman that's good at 5-on-5 offense, right? Especially if he is bad at taking penalties, at defense, at the penalty kill, at the power play, at assists. Like, I think he's, like, just above a net negative in scoring specifically, or finishing technically. But, like, basically the things that he's good at are the things that the Blue Jackets are already fine at, and they don't need to add that. The things that the Blue Jackets need help on are things that he's bad at. So, like, he's not going to help the penalty kill. He's not going to help the power play. He's not going to help the 5-on-5 defense. And he's making $8 million a year for 2 more years. And he's likely going to push another young defenseman out of the lineup. Like, I don't know off the top of my head. I think he's a right defenseman. So, like, yeah, the Blue Jackets kind of have something. They kind of have an ostensibly, like, room on the third hand right pairing. The third pairing right defense, I should say. It'll mean pushing Jordan Harris out of the lineup, he's been struggling, which is a shame, because, again, I've really, really thought highly of him going into the season, and he just continues to struggle, which is really tough to see. But then you have, like, a right-hand side of Dante Fabro, Damon Severson, and Jacob Trouba, which, like, is fine, but I don't know. Again, if the Blue Jackets manage to not give anything up and also get assets, like, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But I don't see the need for it. It feels like making a move just to make a move. And again, like, what happens next season when you have more defensemen pushing for spaces? Like, you know, you have Denton Matejchuk pushing for a spot on defense. You know, if Jake Christensen continues to grow, he's going to look for a spot on defense. Like, I don't know if there's anyone else that is going to potentially be added to that, but they're talking about potentially keeping Provorov for another couple of years. I don't think it's likely. I think he's going to go and get his bag in free agency. So, like, ostensibly that opens something up there. But Eric Branson is still under contract for this season and next season. Like, he's going to be back at some point. And again, unless they move him, which I don't think they will, because they love him in Columbus. And he's injured at the minute. And also, I think it would suck if they traded him because he was one of Johnny Gaudreau's best friends. Like, on the team, that is. You know, so I just don't see how it makes sense. Unless you manage to move, like, something like a Gabranson or a Severson contract, I just don't see how it makes sense to trade for Trouba, because it doesn't help. It doesn't make your lineup better, unless you get, like, crazy assets in return. Which now they're talking about potentially putting him on waivers so the Blue Jackets can pick him up for free, which is such a monumentally stupid idea. Because here's the thing: why would you take that contract for free unless a second trade happens where it's like, okay, well, we'll give you like a first and a second for a seventh or future considerations or whatever. And then we'll put them on waivers. You pick them up on waivers. Just kind of a gross way to do things. Like it's legal by the letter of the law, but it feels real bad, you know? And also, why would you actively pick up a player who said, no, I don't want to play for you. I will not allow you to trade me there. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but like, it feels like another Jeff Carter situation. You know, if you trade for a player, he doesn't want to be there. And then now you're stuck with this player that resents you and it probably isn't going to play well. And is gonna be miserable both like personally and also in the room. Like it just, I don't know. I personally think that you should only try to acquire players that want to be there. You know, if you say, hey, can we have this player, and the player says no, I don't want to be there, I'd be like, you know what, fair enough. I'm not gonna bother trading for a player that doesn't want to be here. Like it's a waste of his time, it's a waste of my time. And I think putting him on waivers to circumvent the no trade clause is gross and bad and feels bad. So we'll see what happens. I haven't had a text about anything happening while I've actively been recording, so at least there's that. But I do expect something to happen probably the next 5 to 10 minutes after I finish recording. But that's kind of all I've got for today. We'll keep you updated on the Trouba conversation. We'll talk tomorrow about tonight's game versus Vancouver, and we'll see where all of this goes. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Bluejacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Once again, we'll have another episode for you tomorrow where we talk about tonight's game and potentially more Trouba talk. Until then, make sure you stay locked on.